Games discussed are rated E through M. For more information, please go to esrb.org. Hello everyone, KirbyVolt here, and it's time to look what I consider to be the best games of 2022 in the later half of 2023. Look, no one said this had to be done at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year of 2022, and honestly, there was a lot of games that 2022 had that I really did enjoy, but when I was reflecting on them, I was kind of like, man, I've done top 10s in the past, but of all the games I played in the past year, I was kind of like, what ones do I actually really enjoy? So I ended up curating my list kind of extensively. So rather than just having a top 10 games of kind of like, I just like these, I went through something more of just like, no, these I definitively think are some of the best new games that came out during the year. And so that narrowed it down to actually 7. So I have 7 top games of 2022. And honestly, it's fine because 7 games is easier to deal with than having to deal with 10, so that's good. And I can also get footage of the 7 games a lot easier compared to doing 10 games, especially because I've done a few of these games on the channel from 2022. That said, though, there were still a ton of games I wanted to acknowledge before I get to the top 7, and kind of what my criteria was in determining what the top 7 was in the first place. My criteria for what my top 7 2022 games were, they had to have been released in 2022. So I played a lot of games that came out before 2022, and I wanted to give mention to them, but I just couldn't. For the list I was making, I wanted to be the best of 2022, and putting a game from 2015 on there didn't seem to be like the best representative of that. In fact, I think some of the games I played that were older kind of shows some of the bad state of the gaming industry right now, but we'll get to those in just a moment. And I also put a criteria that I couldn't do multiple games from the same series. And this seems very weird because it's not usual that the same series has multiple games released in the same year, but I had to do this for a certain few things, and it'll make sense when I go over these honorable mentions, essentially. So with that in mind, let's get to the honorable mentions before we get to the top 7, because I really want to talk about all these games that I did play, because there was a lot to enjoy of them, and I think it's just kind of fun to discuss them. No footage of these ones, because some of these are on the 3DS, and I don't have the ability to get the footage super easily for some of them, because some of them are longer games. And honestly, I'm kind of sad that I didn't play some of these games when they first came out, because they would have been strong contenders for my game of the year in the previous years when I've done these reviews. I tend to kind of like go on and off when I do these reviews or not, so like I didn't do it for 2021, but I really wanted to do it for 2022 because there are games that absolutely deserve praise, and that's why I wanted to bring them up. And then when we get to the top 7, the number 1 is obviously my game of the year, number 2 being the runner-up and probably also game of the year, because I think in 2015 I did 3 games of the year, so you know what, screw it, number 1 and number 2 are both games of the year. But honorable mentions, let's get to those first. This is partially scripted, partially unscripted, so I apologize if it kind of comes off a little whatever, but this is just kind of my honest opinions on the games I played and what I really enjoyed / didn't enjoy, and also why I ranked them where I did. So with honorable mentions, first I have on here is Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. Now, this is kind of an interesting one because I actually have enjoyed a lot of the Warriors spin-off titles, like Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity. Now, this one, I never played the first Fire Emblem Warriors because it didn't seem as interesting to me, but this one having more of a focus on basically being an alternate story to Three Houses, I thought was fun enough to play. We have a new fun main character, and I like the idea that how the gameplay works actually really plays with the tactical elements of a Fire Emblem game. There's a lot of stuff that you actually kind of do where you're guiding different battalions around to say, oh, well, this beats this, so go over here and do this. It's probably I wouldn't say it's probably the most fleshed out Warriors game. I think Age of Calamity still takes the cake on that, but this is definitely one of the higher tier Warriors games, so there's actually a bit more thought into it than just hack and slash. The story is a bit odd, and if you know Three Houses itself, kind of falls apart if you try to pit all the stories against each other because they do not line up timeline wise, and this one just goes off a completely different direction. So it's fun to just kind of see this alternate history, essentially. If you really like these characters and you like the Warriors gameplay all right, you'll definitely enjoy this. And it was a fun romp and definitely kept me busy for a few months during 2022. Next up for honorable mention, I have Rhythm Heaven Mega Mix. This was a 3DS only title that is forever locked away because it was only released on the eShop in the North America region. Thanks, Nintendo. I pretty much played this because of the impending death of the 3DS. It has already happened now in 2023, but it was coming about in 2022, so I basically went about collecting a bunch of different 3DS games. And of the ones I played, or I had time to play during 2022, I loved this one. Rhythm Heaven is such a fun experience, and it's really simple initially, but it takes a lot of time and skill to master. And what I like is that it basically brings all the best minigames that the series has done so far through all the entries it's had, along with some new ones that just kind of really amp up the difficulty and amp up some of the challenge. I think I just kind of really got sucked into I love all the different music bits. I liked it had a bit of a story, and the story was absolutely bonkers, and that was kind of fun. I have actually played some of the Street Pass features on it, which is kind of crazy of how those work now. And there's just a lot to offer, a lot of different challenges, rooms to do perfect runs, which can range from being pretty simple to extremely hard. And honestly, I wish that this game was on the Switch. I feel that it got released in 2015, which is probably one of Nintendo's worst years. I know not financially it was their worst year, but I know it was one of their worst years as far as releases went. And I feel like this went under the radar, especially because it didn't get a physical release. Luckily, there is physical release in both Japan and the UK, so we at least have some preservation of the English version somewhere. But it sucks that this didn't get a physical release in the US. And a new Rhythm Heaven would be fantastic. I know it's the same team that does the WarioWare games, but I would love to see them go do another Rhythm Heaven. I'm sure Nintendo probably has no interest in doing that, but dang, if this has to be the last game it goes out on, at least it was a banger. Still, make more Rhythm Heaven games, please. It's been over 7 years. Let's Rhythm Heaven on Switch, please, please, please. All the music, all the games, super fun. I really enjoyed playing that. Next honorable mention I have is Klonoa Phantasy Reverie. So this is a really interesting game because I've known of Klonoa since I was about 11, 12-ish, because I grew up with a PlayStation 1, and PlayStation 1 had a bunch of demo discs you would get for either magazines or just kind of other various means. So I always played the very first stage of Klonoa through a demo disc that I remember playing fondly as a kid, but I never actually played the full game. And I heard a lot of good things about the sequel, but the sequel never came to my attention because I was on the PS2, and I didn't actually have a PS2 when I was in my middle school/high school years. But this particular game, now having a remastered version of the first game that's better than the one that we did, as well as a enhanced version of the second game, are fantastic and a nice bundle. It was finally great to go and play the first Klonoa game again and actually get to experience the whole thing. What a fun game. What a great soundtrack. Has some tricky bits in it too, but it's not too terrible and it's not too difficult, so I think it's just a fun romp to go through. And then I was blown away by Klonoa 2. Klonoa 2 was fantastic. It is easily the better game of the two, and it makes me sad there hasn't been an official Klonoa 3. And I'm hoping that this game gets some more sales so that we can get Klonoa back, because I think Klonoa as a platforming game is really fun. I know there are some GBA games that came out for Klonoa as well, but I haven't touched any of those. Maybe we'll see those on Switch Online or something? No idea. But I don't think those play quite the exact same that Klonoa 1 and Klonoa 2 did. And I'm really excited to kind of see this character show up again, because Klonoa is super cute, the world is super cute, the music is really dang good. The music in 2, I was surprised by how many tracks in 1 were just absolute bangers, but then 2 surprised me with just how how good that soundtrack can be and just how varied it was too. There's part where like you're in a carnival, there's a part where you're in a town that's at war. There's so many crazy things going on with it. And I also like the lore of Klonoa itself, of just kind of how kind of serious it takes itself. It's just really fun, and I love cutesy mascot characters, and I want to see more of them. So Namco, I know you've been doing a lot of ports of old games. I know just this year in 2023 we had We Love Katamari Reroll plus Royal Reverie. Can we just get new games? Katamari I know has a ton of games, so I'm not too big on Katamari getting a new one. Just do ports of those. But new Klonoa, please. Klonoa I don't believe has had a game since the early 2000s, and that's kind of a shame. I think Klonoa's a really, really fun character. But yeah, if you haven't played the Fantasy Riviera, it's on every platform. So go pick it up if you can and enjoy them. They're two very solid, good platforming games. All right, another honorable mention is Luminous Avenger X2, and this is where that rule of I have to keep it to one series per numbered slots in, because this contended with another game that we'll get to later. This game, I did a Let's Play on it back in 2022, ending off earlier this year. It's still a very good game, but dang, that one kink in its armor at the end kind of sours the mood. And I'm glad that Inti Creates went back and addressed that, but it was still kind of a sucker punch the first time I played through it. That said, this is still a perfectly good follow-up to the first Luminous Avenger X, and I think I just loved it entirely. Sans that thing at the end, but that thing is a super big thing at the end. It's not necessary, and what they put into the game now can make it more accessible, so I'm glad about that. But what I really liked is just all the stages were super varied. I feel like the previous Gunvolt games, both 1 and 2, and the first Luminous Avenger X, were not super varied in different stage types, but X2 definitely went kind of out there with all different kinds of stage types, different types of music, different types of ways that the boss weapons worked and everything. I actually really liked how Copen plays in this game. I know it's not the same as in X1 or Gunvolt 2, but I actually really enjoyed what they were going for with this new gameplay style. And I'm kind of curious to do if they were to do an X3, which it kind of seems like the door's open for that. If they were to do X3, if there would be a new gameplay style, or if it would be based off this one, or maybe there would be a mode to switch between the two gameplay styles of 1 and 2. Honestly, I was just happy to kind of enjoy these characters, not to mention this is the first Inti Creates game I've played that actually had English dubbing, and my goodness, the English cast knocked it out of the park. I was so happy with that, and it definitely, as a Westerner, as much as I know quite a bit of Japanese, and I'm fine playing a game with Japanese audio and English text, it helps a lot to immerse yourself more. Hearing the characters in your own native language, it brings you into the game more, I feel. And I think that was just really helpful, and I really enjoyed that. Also, I think all the Lolo songs in this game are bangers, and honestly, probably the best soundtrack as far as vocal songs go in the entire Gunvolt series, so really good. Oh, and of course, there's the DLC boss fights that they added throughout the year, and all of those are super fun. I love all those. I love the music for all those. It's so cool that they did some cross-promotion with some other indie titles, and also doing some cross-promotion with their own titles, leading up to a promotion with Gunvolt 3 with the final DLC character. But man, that Jason and Sophia fight is still probably the best DLC boss. I love that one so much. And in hindsight, with this year now that I've played some other games, I have more intrigue in that Corona boss fight, so I'm probably going to go back to that at some point and do that again, because that's also a really fun fight. Just, the bosses themselves are super fun to play, so long as it's not in the original intended mode for how you get the true ending. That said, it's still really fun, and since they've essentially made it more accessible, definitely pick it up. It's really fun, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed the Let's Play I did of it too. Final honorable mention before we get to our main list, and man, if this game had released this year, it would be on the list, because it was such a good game. It is honestly the best strategy RPG game I've ever played. Too bad the company that made it went defunct right after this game came out. Stella Glow. This was a super fun 3DS title to play. It luckily does have a physical release, so it's easier to come by. I mean, jacked up prices and everything now, but at least it has some way to preserve it. I only have it digitally, so that's gonna probably bite me in the butt later. But still, I loved the character designs, I loved the characters themselves, I loved the different gameplay aspects of how music plays into the game, and I just found it like fascinating. I haven't played a lot of strategy RPGs outside of like Fire Emblem, so this was definitely a kind of new territory for me for how units moved and everything. But I like that all of them were unique and all of them felt useful in their own way. And it became a difficulty of picking which units I wanted to actually bring to the battle because all of them had different uses that could really help. The story actually like really engrossed me. I really was kind of excited to learn different things about it, and just it was just really cool. And it's such a shame now that it's locked behind either a large paywall for a physical release or just not at all in digital landscape now. And I'm so sad that this company went defunct because, man, if I kind of wish that if I had played this back when it released in 2015, I would have just been like hyping this game nonstop. This would have been my game of the year in 2015 for sure if it had come out then, or if I had played it then, rather. If you're able to get it for a good price, pick this game up. I cannot recommend this game enough. I don't want to talk too much about it because it gets into spoilers, but man, I love a lot of the different systems they use in the game, how you level up your characters, how you get different skills for some of your characters depending on what kind of class they are, and how those different skills play into the battle. It's so cool. And I remember the final boss, like I was probably up at like 2 a.m. just like hyping out and jamming to the music because it was such a cool experience. There's also a new game plus in it that allows you to basically go for everything, because there are some things you can actually get during your first playthrough of the game. So there's a lot of replay value for it too. And I was smart and went, you know what? Maybe someday I might do this game on the channel. I don't know when, because these are long games, and if I wanted to do everything I'd want to do in New Game Plus mode, but I do have this on my recording 3DS, so maybe one day I'll show this game off. This game is super cool, and I hope the staff, whoever worked on this game, the original developers, I hope they're getting work right now, and I hope that they're able to maybe come together with a smaller company or some other group so they can get back to making games like this, because this was fantastic. And honestly, most of the honorable mentions could have made a slot for the true top 10 video, but, I was like, let's just go with the 7, because with the 7, I have a lot more to say about them compared to the honorable mentions, so I wanted to kind of just make this part brief so that we can get on to the actual top 7. So, with that all said, this is my list first and foremost, so if you don't agree with it, that's totally fine. If you agree with it, that's also totally fine. Do what you want to do. But from here, let's get to the top 7 best games, in my opinion, of 2022. Starting with number 7. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. If there's one thing I always advocate for, it's more sprite-based games that don't go for the NES style that's been done so heavily by now. Shredder's Revenge, luckily, is kind of more of a callback to the arcade of yore and homage. So it brings back that lost art of the arcade sprite work from like the early 90s, kind of SNES style too, in full front display, and all the animations look gorgeous, the game looks gorgeous, the backgrounds, everything just plays nicely, visually speaking, in this game. And luckily, thanks to that visual style being the front and foremost, it's a good thing that the rest of the game is also just freaking solid. There's a bunch of different playable characters, the enemies, the environments, everything looks super great and has all that great sprite detail you'd love to see. Probably not the most modern sprites by any means, but definitely it captures that arcade feeling perfectly, if not even better than some of the arcade Turtles games from back in the day. The game itself is gnarly and has some of the best stuff that really is associated with the Turtles. The Turtles have been reinterpreted so many times over the different decades that it's hard to kind of put a lid onto what these ones should or shouldn't be. And this is definitely a play to the original 80s cartoon, so getting back the original voice cast as much as they could, and definitely trying to evoke that similar tone and style of how kind of zany that series was. It doesn't take into account a lot of the more recent kind of beat 'em up stuff that makes them a bit more replayable, but in that, it makes it simple enough that it's easy to just pop in and pop out whenever you feel like it. Offering a bunch of different stages, having all the characters have essentially unique movesets so you can level up through a story mode or just go ham with in an arcade mode really helps it a lot, and just having it be able to be 6 players online is fantastic. I've played a few games now with some people online, either with randos or with friends, and getting a full room of 6 is a magical experience. You just get to see all these people kind of going everywhere. It's kind of hard to keep track of yourself in the chaos of it, but it's such a fun experience just to kind of see how the game scales to all of that and how you deal with it. All the different enemies, too, have different reactions and different ways to beat them up and just destroy them, with different animations for how they can be destroyed and whatnot, or how you can throw them and stuff. It's just really cool, and it does pay a tribute to a lot of the Turtles lore. There is definitely going to be some cameo in there that I'm not aware of because I'm not a huge Turtles nerd, that other Turtles fans are going to get a kick out of just seeing. That said, it's a bit of a short game. It's not meant to be a long game. Again, it's meant to go back to those arcade days of yours, but because of that, it's why it slots in number 7. Everything about this game is just absolutely polished. The music, I didn't even get it to, is rockin'. Every stage has fantastic music tracks that are either instrumental, and a few ones that have vocals as well. One of them, my favorite, is a one that you're in the sky for, and it's just a really cool concept that you're basically doing the highway / sewer stage from the older games, except in the sky, and it's just, there's lots of cool things to pay attention to in the background and everything. And man, it's just really exciting. I know I'm kind of just ranting at this point, and that's kind of what most of these are, is just like, I like these games, here's why I like them. KV gushes about them. But yeah, I wish that this game had a bit more content to it. And at this current recording, there's going to be DLC for this game, so it's going to get some more content. So that's going to be interesting to see. I'm not sure if it's going to add more stages or not, make the game a bit longer, but it's cool to see that this game's still getting sort of support a year after its release. And it definitely deserves it because, man, this team really nailed everything just top-notch. I'm someone who likes to have games that can last them for a bit, though, so it's not to its detriment necessarily that it's short, it's just that in it being short, there isn't much to go and redo. Like with other games, because I know a famous short game I like is Kirby Star Allies, but there's a ton to do in that game after you be in the main story. There's not a lot to do in this game in that regard, but it's a very chill game. Just be like, hey, have some friends that want to play it, just call them up and just go for it. That said, with that DLC coming, I wonder if there's in the cards there might be a Shredder's Revenge 2, because this game was honestly just that good that I'm glad this team's still working together to bring more content to it, and I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to turn out. But yes, number 7 with Shredder's Revenge. Fantastic on all platforms, and go pick it up if you haven't already. Number 6. So, full disclosure on this one, this was a game that was supported by many backers through a Kickstarter campaign, and I was one of them. So I have a bit of a bias with this one, but it's also the most recent game I've just done on my channel. So, number 6 is Frogun. For me, as a kid, I grew up playing games on the Game Boy and the PlayStation. I never was super into the N64 because I hated its controller design, and there was more games in the PlayStation. So I was just more interested in PlayStation games in general, so I kind of grew up with a different type of 3D platformer compared to the Mario 64s and the Banjo-Kazooies. So Frogun itself is a throwback to kind of more of the 3D platformers that the PlayStation had compared to the N64, because I grew up with games like Croc and Spyro and at least one of the Crash Bandicoots. And while not all those games are still great today, they have that sense of charm to them. And I like that Froggen essentially goes back to bringing that kind of charm to it. What's really cool about it is that it not only mimics the style of the visuals perfectly for what it would look like on a PlayStation, it also kind of keeps some of that jank in a little bit, and that might be that may be hit or miss of some people, but it brings me back to my childhood, so I kind of enjoyed that a little bit. What I'm just happy about now is that we're starting to see games that are stylized in different retro forms that aren't just the 8-bit NES style. I know next year we're getting Penny's Big Breakout, and that looks amazing, and I'm just excited for more games like this. Froggen itself is just... The Let's Play I've done of it already can speak for itself, but man, it's such a game with a lot of charm and honestly a good difficulty curve. Minus the fifth world. The fifth world is bad. I liked how it has this cuteness to it throughout in all the enemy designs and how some of the stages are designed and how it just kind of all works out at the end. What's really neat about the game is that you don't have to go for everything. The levels are all designed so that there's an end goal no matter what. But if you want to do some more exploration, you can go out of your way to try to get some of the extra gems, some of the extra emeralds, or some of the extra special bonuses, in addition to then having some challenges or redoing stages such as taking no damage or doing a speed run. What I think is really cool about this is that it adds a lot of replayability to the game, so it makes everything kind of work together nicely with each other. And it does kind of bring back to, again, some of those older PlayStation games that would have stuff like that. That some, well, I don't know about No Hit, or, sorry, No Death. No Death, that's different. I don't know about No Death. Oh, maybe No Death, but definitely some time trials that were in previous PlayStation games, getting the special items throughout. All of that. And what's also cute is that it tells a cute little story about these runes, this family of adventurers, Jake. You know what you did, Jake. And other people who have been to these runes and how the inhabitants of these runes work in a society and whatnot. And it's just, for me, like, I was super excited to back it because of that. And I know there's some things about it, like maybe Renata could be a little faster. Some of the jumps the game wants you to do are a bit finicky, but I don't know. To me, that adds to the charm. I really like how all the different environments play into how the music plays out. All the music in the game is fantastic. Each area having its own specific theme that works with it for the most part. I know, like, Worlds 2 and 5 don't really have a consistent theme, but it all comes together in a nice package that really feels like you're really getting better at the game as you're going, as it throws more challenges to you. I think the concept of Froggen itself is just fantastic. The idea that you basically just have a whip to go around, and not having to be, like, too crazy, not like Indiana Jones crazy, but still like something that you just latch on to things. And it adds a lot of cool ideas to gameplay. I think that they didn't get as far as they could have. They didn't push as far as they could with the gameplay concept in this one, but it was definitely a good first outing to show how this can work. I haven't fully completed this game. Not sure if I ever will, because some of the stuff it wants you to do is ridiculous, but I really enjoyed my time with this game, and I'm really excited that I put an enemy into the game, because I made a doodle, and that became an enemy in one of the bonus stages of the game, and it's really cute, and I love that enemy, and thank you to the developers, and yeah, no, this game is super adorable and wholesome. Difficult, but wholesome. Number 5. River City Girls 2. So I love WayForward games. They can be original creations, adaptations of existing works, but they're pretty much never a miss for me. One of the biggest surprises for me from 2019 was the partnership between WayForward and Arc System Works that brought the first River City Girls game basically to the masses, essentially. I've never played any of the River City or Kunio-kun games, but the River City Girls 1 caught my attention. I picked it up, and then I was like, this is really fun. And now, 3 years later, or at this point almost 4 years later, we have a new game, and honestly, it's just as amazing, if not even more jam-packed than the first one. It brings a more modern take to the beat-em-up style. This is why I put Turtles in 7th, because Turtles is definitely the classic, old-school beat-em-up style. But River City Girls 2 shines a lot through its visual style and its addictive gameplay, utilizing a lot of modern features that really keep you wanting to play. So there's a ton of positives to talk about this game, but let's get the negatives out of the way first. This game allows for online play, unlike the previous game, but that can be a bit hit or miss depending on your internet connection, which version of the game you're playing, and it's also one of WayForward's first forays into online play, so it's probably not like the best look at how they can handle it, but I'm kind of curious how they do it in the future. Additionally, you can only play with one other person online, whereas if you're to play local co-op, you can actually do that 4-player. It's honestly, I give it a pass, but it is kind of noticeable at some points, especially because I play the Switch version, which is apparently the weakest version, even though the first game initially came out on the Switch, so not sure what happened there, but it's still playable and it's still fine. It's just, it can be a little jank at time with online. That said, the actual game, when you're not online, runs perfectly fine. There's also been a lot of updates for it since it originally came out, so I think when I initially typed up the script that I had for this review, I had some other things to say, but they don't apply anymore because they've actually fixed them, so it's not as big of an issue. The one thing I do dislike, though, just like as a final dislike, is that all the characters, you can level them up, which is really cool, and I like how they do that leveling up system, but there's a cap of level 30, and I feel like this is a holdover from the previous game, because this game is so much more massive than the previous game. If you're just playing the same character the entire game, you will hit that level cap before you reach the end, and I kind of thought that was a little silly. I thought, like, maybe they could have put like 10 extra levels in or something. I get the idea is they want you to play as the other characters, but I like Kyoko. I just want to play as my girl Kyoko, man. That's all I want to do. But it did get me wanting to try the other characters out, especially because there are 6 characters to choose from this time. We bring back Kyoko and Misako from the first game, as well as Riki and Kunio, who you have unlocked from the start as opposed to having to beat the game previously. All of them have unique moves and all play very differently. So just because you played through the game as one character doesn't mean you're going to have the exact same experience if you play through the game as a different character. Riki has some like crazy moves. I can never understand how Misako works, and Kunio is extremely silly. I kind of find it funny that Misako and Kyoko have boyfriends that are basically the personality of their best friend. Wonder if that will lead to anything. But there is 2 new characters as well. There's Marion, who is actually from Double Dragon. She was in the previous game as a shopkeep, now she's here as a full fighter, and a new character called Pruvi. I don't know much about Pruvi and what she was supposed to be, or who she's supposed to represent, but both of them have extremely unique gameplay styles. I love Pruvi's probably the most of the 2, because she does a lot of cool things by doing a lot of breakdancing across the screen and everything. It's really neat. But of course, I want to play as Kyoko because she has the best move, the dab. That said, it's nice that you can basically mix and match the characters as you go through a single-player adventure or a multiplayer adventure. Anytime you hit an area called Safe House, you can easily go and swap between characters. You can swap items between characters so you can get them leveled up with some more stat boost items or some different items that help out in the battlefield and whatnot. But honestly, what I really like about this game is just the feeling of there's a feeling of choice with this game. From when it starts out, it's linear, but then a bunch of branches open up, and it's up to you as the player to determine what you want to do first. I think that's really cool as you explore this entire beat-em-up area, and gain levels, gain experience, and then get to choose how you want to essentially make your character build based on different stat increase items you can find and buy throughout the game. Additionally, as you level up, you get access to more moves that you buy from a dojo, and those really make all the characters shine incredibly bright depending on your gameplay style. I'm definitely still in the Kyoko camp because I think her gameplay style fits me the most, but again, like Pruvi, as I was mentioning, has crazy breakdance moves that go everywhere. Marion has a freaking counter, which is really cool. Riki has some really silly moves too, like where you can just like dash, he does like this kick where he does this kick in the air that goes across the screen that's really silly. I like Kunio's heavy attack that's just him eating a burger. But in addition to that, besides just doing the main game, there's a bunch of different side missions to do. You collect some cards, cats, getting all the different recruits you can find throughout the entire city of River City, I guess. So there's a bunch of returning areas from the previous game that all look fantastic with some fresh paint on them, as well as a few new areas as well, like a dance club, a haunted forest, a abandoned theme park, a tech lab, and a restaurant. The restaurant's the best area. Don't at me. I also kind of like how it plays the story straight as if the first game happened completely normally without anything crazy happening, and how that kind of reflects how the game ends up going. Honestly, like, at this point, I don't know what else you could do to make this game better, but that was what makes me the most excited, because this to me is one of the best beat-em up games I've ever played, period. So if this is the bar, and they keep going, Way4 and Arc System Work keep going to do this, I'm kind of curious what a third game would be like. And as a testament to how much I enjoy playing this game, I ended up recording over 3 hours of B-roll that you're seeing right now. Obviously not the full 3 hours, but like I enjoy it so much that I was just like, I'll keep going. I'll keep recording. 3 hours, that's fine. I'll figure out a way to use this in the final video, I'm sure. That's because I was just having so much fun with it. And it's a game that's nice and fun to pick up and replay again. There's a lot of different things to do to get 100%. It's just, there's a lot. And I feel bad that I kind of keep ranting as opposed to reading my script, which I should be doing, but I feel like I've covered all the main bases with this, and it's still just a fantastic game to play. It's on multiple systems. Obviously, I think the Steam version is the most, I don't want to say stable, but is the most polished of all of them. But the other versions on consoles, like I played the Switch version, perfectly fine, perfectly serviceable, it works, and I still consider it one of the best beat 'em games I've ever played, so take that as you will. But I want to see River City Girls 3. I would be interested in playing that game. Would they have more characters? Would they have better online? I don't know, like, there's just a lot of stuff they can do, and I'm kind of curious to see what they would do, because the core game itself is just perfect as is. So I'm kind of curious how they could even up the ante on that. But that'll have to wait until another time, because now we got to get to our next game on the list. Number 4. Okay, let's get this out of the way first and foremost. I didn't have a problem with the ending. If you know the ending, you know, but it wasn't a deal breaker for me. I think in of itself it speaks to a broader issue that all these games in this particular series have in this one element, but I don't think that ruins the overall package. And basically what I'm saying is the story in these games have never been the most, like, consistent. They're kind of broad to the sense that it's kind of hard to keep track in the first place. But with that all done, let's talk about Bayonetta 3. Bayonetta games are giant spectacles that have so many crazy moments, and in all of the gameplay, it's just so hard to kind of wrap your head around it. Well, I think they all tell fun narratives, they're just so grand spectacle that can, again, be kind of hard to tell a full picture sometimes. I wouldn't change it though, because the spectacle moments are more than worth it. And I can see, basically, because of that though, why some people didn't like how this game goes in a certain direction near the end. But I don't think that ruins the game. I think the game is still perfectly fine, and honestly, probably the freshest of the Bayonetta games so far as gameplay goes. From the moment you hear the sweeping strings of another beautiful Frank Sinatra song remix that picks up on Bayonetta's weapons, everything just clicks. Controls are very responsive, and you have more fluidity to them than in previous games, allowing for gameplay that is near seamless as you bash enemies up. One of the new features of this game is this Demon Masquerade, which allows Bayonetta to essentially merge the demons she contracts to bring her new abilities in, depending on what the weapons you use. And I actually really like this idea, and I think it was better than what they had done in previous games, where she had like different forms she could take, but some of those forms weren't really useful in combat setting, or some of them weren't useful in an exploration setting. This kind of merges them together, so they're useful in both. And I like that the different weapons kind of determine the different forms, because basically it forces you to want to use different weapons to kind of see what everything does. Every weapon has a different type of dash, every weapon has a different type of double jump. It really makes you kind of want to play around with them a lot. And I ended up doing that. I ended up picking one weapon I absolutely just adored the entire time, but still, it made me interested in trying to try all the different And trying to try? Yeah, I'm trying to try all the different weapons out. We still have the witch time, which I think is probably the easiest to execute of all the games, but that comes at a cost for one reason, and I think the idea that you're able to do it so fluidly with Bayonetta is to contrast with a new playable character the game brings in. Bayonetta 3 tells a very interesting story about basically the multiverse and how it's kind of collapsing around itself. I don't think it ever fully goes into this idea that grand, but it gives us a lot of different settings and a lot of different locations to play with. So we have Tokyo, Japan, we have warring China, we have Egypt as depicted in all pop culture fiction. So, you know, not how Egypt actually is today. And also, oh yeah, and then one of my favorites is one where you're in France, and a Bayonetta there is basically like their version of Arsène Lupin. And I was just like, man, that's so cool. You get to see all these different Bayonettas and how they all work in their different dimensions, and I think that's just really cool, just teaming up with them, meeting characters new and old from the previous games too, getting a lot of questions about how the heck Rodon even works, because apparently he exists in all dimensions? Question mark? But you are given a new playable character in the form of Viola. Viola is basically kind of the antithesis of Bayonetta, and I think that's really funny. She is crass, she is a bit rude, she's punk, and her witch time is extremely hard to pull off. There's actually a lore reason for this, but I can understand why some people didn't agree with that when the game first released. The game has since been patched so that now it's easier to activate her witch time a bit, but I understand why they didn't want that to be the crutch for the player, because the gameplay of Viola is very different from Bayonetta, and with Viola, in order to activate witch time, you need her particular weapon, but that weapon can also be a summon. And I love the summon that Viola has because I love the design of that demon. But in that, you're kind of defenseless with Viola, so you need to be doing basically all-out attacks. And I prefer to use that demon overall, so I kind of understood the gameplay, but it definitely is hard to master compared to Bayonetta's main gameplay, especially because with the Demon Masquerade that Bayonetta has, it's so much easier to kind of swap between the motions as you're going through combat. You basically... I know this is what Bayonetta's supposed to do, but the gameplay does feel like you were literally dancing around as you're beating up all of the different weird things you come across through Bayonetta's odd adventure. I really actually enjoyed the music in this game. I haven't really paid much attention to the music in the previous Bayonetta games, but this one definitely got my ear the most, and I think it's because, again, there's so many different varied locations that every location has a unique style or theme to it. So, like, one area is pop music themed, one area is jazz themed. It's a lot of cool different contrasting ideas that really works together to kind of show how big this multiverse thing is. I kind of wish the game was a bit longer, though, if I'm gonna be real. It's still very hefty in its own right, but I think the issue is that when you're doing an idea like this that's multiverse, you're expecting to see a lot of multiverse stuff. And it kind of scratches that itch with the concept, and there's this fantastic spectacle at the end of the game, and it was just like wowing me because I was thinking, man, this is freaking amazing. But I don't think they dive really into that concept with either the man-made enemies or the multiverse thing, which makes me really curious as to how the next entry is going to go, if they might come back to visit this concept. Because essentially now, what we've had with the 3 games is we've had Heaven enemies, because we had Paradiso in the first game. We've had Hell enemies in the second game. You fought mostly those. And now we have man-made creatures from Earth, essentially, in the third game. So I'm kind of curious what they're going to do from there, but I feel like there's a lot you can still do with this concept alone. I think that speaks volumes of just kind of how fun the game was. Because after beating it, I was just like, man, let's go play all the stages again, because all of them are so much fun, and it makes you want to go for those platinum medals. Outside of some of Viola's gameplay, which can be rough, I feel that the game really encourages you to keep playing. There's different little missions you can do for each stage that unlocks different sub-missions that you can do then, that are like special boss fights or whatnot, that can give you access to new weapons, new types of gear and whatnot. And just getting all those leveled up to get all the different combos and try all those out is super fun. And again, just made me want to be like, oh, well, let's just play the game again. I think I played through it at least 2 times, if not 3 times, because I wanted to just kind of go through everything. I still haven't gotten everything in the game because I'm not the best at the combat, but it's still really fun and it's really exhilarating to play through. I think this is honestly, in my opinion, Platinum's best work, up there with Astral Chain. I think those 2 games, basically the games they've made for the Switch apparently, are some of the best games that they've done so far. And what I'm kind of more curious about then is because Astral Chain's gameplay and Bayonetta they're not the exact same, but they're very similar. I'm kind of curious to what would be happening if those gameplay styles were to cross. And I remember in the initial trailer for Bayonetta 3, there was some Astral Chain cross-promotion with a certain character in Astral Chain, which in the final version of the game, there isn't any. It's just there as a cameo, which was kind of sad. But obviously, this is a Bayonetta game first and foremost. But also, hearing from what the developers have said, apparently, Bayonetta is meant to be 9 sagas, or 9 arcs. 9 chapters, I think, is what they said in an interview, but all the games have chapters, so 9 books, I guess. So if this is only a third of the way through the series, what's the rest of the plan? I'm really curious. There was also this year Bayonetta Origins. That doesn't count, obviously, for this list, but it's interesting to know that that game was in development concurrently with this one, and how they kind of play off each other. I think there's going to be a lot more interesting remarks about Bayonetta 3 if you actually end up playing Bayonetta Origins as well. Because I think the game lends itself narratively to how that game plays out a little bit, and how it can kind of give a clue or hints as to how future games might be. But yeah, I would still love a Bayonetta 4. I think the gameplay just is tight as it is, keeping the music as it is, and just honestly, Bayonetta as a character is really fun. And Bayonetta character I probably don't like as much as other people, but I like her interactions with all the other characters that come into the series, because that to me is where the humor's at, and I love that kind of stuff. I love how she's kind of dismissive of Viola. I love literally every interaction of Enzo, because Enzo's a freaking hilarious character. Oh, I like the beginning of the game where Rodon is a freaking pizza delivery guy. What is going on there? There's a lot of silly things, and I love just kind of the grandiose spectacle of it. It wants to be this grand thing, and it always achieves it, but there's always these silly things in it too that I think are just so freaking amazing. Man, I don't want to get into spoilers, but Chapter 12, that's all I'll say. Chapter 12 is just the perfect Bayonetta chapter in any Bayonetta game. So, pick it up if you haven't already. I believe this is the best-selling Bayonetta game thus far, which is good, and I highly recommend it. If you're not a fan of the ending, that's totally okay, but I would still play the game because the game itself is phenomenal in its own right. You might not like how some of the narrative goes, but that's fine, because games are about the gameplay first, man, and the gameplay is just really, really dang solid in this one. So, yeah. Kamiya. Mr. Kamiya. Bayonetta 4. When's it happening? I want to know. Thank you. Number 3. Alright, so for those of you who saw my Let's Play of this game, you know how much I've already praised it to bits. I'm not sure what else to say about that. As for those of you who haven't, I'll try my best to summarize Azure Striker Gunvolt 3, Inti Create's best game to date. It's good, it's great, it's fantastic, play it. There, that's all I need to say. Next number. Okay, but seriously, why even start with this? Alright. So I've loved the work of Inti Creates for nearly 20 years now. Playing all the Gunvolt games blind on my channel has been extremely fun for me, even if I missed some of the things initially that are going on in those games, especially with Gunvolt 1 having not the best initial translated scripts. But I think what makes 3 stand out to me the most is just how fluid the gameplay is, and how much I keep wanting to revisit it. It's interesting, because the previous 2 games, there's stuff to do to kind of keep playing the game to kind of get better skills and gears and whatnot, but I never felt as emboldened to because of how it was set up. But with 3, I always feel like, oh, well, I could just play another stage. I'll just play another stage and try to get some new thing, maybe. In this game, we take control of a new character, Kirin, of Shadow Yakumo. She wants to tell you that all the time. And see what's happened in the undetermined amount of time since the previous game. Gunvolt eventually joins another playable character, and he's busted. There's so much fun to be had playing as Gunvolt thanks to them to removing some mechanics from the first two that kind of weighed the gameplay down. So what I'm talking about that is like, you know how like the first two games there was those materials to collect and you'll get one material and it's random chance what material? Yeah, they've done away with that. Good riddance. That system sucks. The system to replace it with is still a gacha mechanic, but these skills you get are easy to use and you get them right away as opposed to having to do any crafting system. The crafting system in the first two Gunvolt games just wasn't fun, and I'm glad they've gotten rid of it. Kirin herself, though, is super fun to play as. Probably one of the most fun 2D action protags that Inti has made gameplay-wise in a long time. I was ready to find this game mostly okay, or at least good, after how stellar Luigi's Mansion X2 was, but time and time again, this game kept blowing it out of the water. So many different locales, an extremely diverse OST, and a lot of fun bosses and characters that were actually fun to get to know. Something that actually really stings about the first two Gunvolt games is that there's a large cast in those games of the different boss characters, of the different friend characters you have, and you don't really get to know any of them that well. Part of this is language barrier again. Hearing Japanese and reading English text is a bit of it confuses your brain a little bit, so having an English voice cast for this game as well is fantastic, so you definitely feel more rooted in them. But I like what they did with these boss characters is you don't just get rid of them right away. You actually keep the boss characters around through the entirety of the game, and you get to know them more as people as you're going through the game. And I think that's something that's kind of sorely missing in the first two games, because you don't really get to know any of those characters too well. I feel like the only character you get to know kind of well between those two games are Copen's sister in Gunvolt 2 and Quinn in Gunvolt 2. I don't feel you get to know many of the other characters that well, the boss characters or the members of Quill in the first game, which makes some of the emotional moments in those games not ring as well. But having Jewel, of course, in the first two games definitely was the centerpiece of those games, and I like that that was still kind of the case here, in a sense. But it was nice to get to know these other characters because I actually felt like there was camaraderie around this team of different characters and how they all functioned essentially. I think what's interesting to me is just how the gameplay works between swapping between Kirin and Gunvolt. How there's different music for playing the different characters, so Gunvolt has his own iteration of your stage theme, which is really neat. And how it all kind of works together. I think the issue they have with Gunvolt is that they have made him too powerful, and I kind of understand that, but I kind of also like that as an idea, because I feel that Gunvolt's initial gameplay, his initial gameplay as seen in the first game, works and is fine for the time, but they have made better gameplay styles, and I think Gunvolt feels the most like himself in how he plays in this game. That comes at the cost of he is tied behind Kirin at all times, but I think that kind of works out to its benefits. I'm not quite sure how they do Gunvolt in the future, because I think that now that we have this more powerful Gunvolt, maybe doing something that you can just unlocks stuff as you go along, as you level up or have the skill tree or something. Don't bring that crafting system back, that crafting system sucked. I like the idea of the image pulse system in this game because the image pulses essentially give you different skills and also are callbacks to all different kind of characters from the entire franchise. It does at least help bring some more interesting ideas and bring some more closure to understanding some of those characters better from the previous games because of these image pulses, which kind of sucks that you didn't get to know them super well in the previous games, but again, that's why I feel that this game just does the best narratively, because you actually are connected to all these characters. There is a bit of a lingering thing of the game that I won't get too much into because I don't want spoilers, but if you're curious as to how the heck Gunvolt 2 connects to this one, the game doesn't really answer that. And there's some stuff that you can kind of infer from that, but the game doesn't go out of its way to explain that. And I can think that was kind of a missed opportunity, but I know that there's a lot of extra Gunvolt media that usually goes into explaining that kind of stuff. I don't particularly care for that, because if you're not going to put them in the game, why bother? But at least in the core game we got to see all the different characters interact with each other, from the different boss characters that become some of your friends, and some of the different boss characters that remain the main antagonists throughout the entire game, and how they interact with different characters. Especially thanks to a certain DLC that came out, all free, that actually has you play as play an epilogue as a different character completely. And I think that how that character plays is probably going to dictate how Gunvolts plays in future games. Currently, though, I don't think Inti Creates is interested in doing another Gunvolt game. I'm not sure why, because I'd be interested in at least. Kieran herself is a fun protagonist, and I would just love to see her again in general. So we could possibly get another Gunvolt spin-off series, which I'd be fine with. But what I really enjoy is just how the game flows between stages. Every stage, again, like Luminous Adventure X2, feels like a unique location. Nothing feels like it's repetitive, like the first two games kind of felt at some points. You go from different places like a shopping district on Christmas Eve, to a Japanese temple, to a cyber cafe that it's in Japan, but it looks like it's supposed to be based off a cyber cafe from Korea. All of different music styles that represents the areas perfectly, and all of different bosses and different fun attacks. Some of the fun of this game is learning the boss patterns, because they're actually a lot more fun to learn because of how the gameplay style works. They no longer have a continue system like they did in the previous game with the kudos and everything. It's just, you just get a checkpoint and keep going, and you just keep the kudos that you had. So that actually helps kind of inform the gameplay a bit better. It allows you to hear more of the Lumen songs compared to previous games. Unfortunately, some of the Lumen songs aren't as good as the previous games were, but there are ways to get previous songs from those games back and play them in this current game, which is really fun. And I definitely have done that a lot throughout. And it makes me really want to go, again, kind of like I said of some of the previous games on this list, go back through the stages and get the best rank possible. The best rank to get is S++, which is a super high score, super fast time, and it's just really cool to kind of hone your skills to figure out how to do that, and then get different new image pulses from that, and utilize those, how to set your skills tree up and everything. It's just really, really cool. Overall, I think this is honestly the best Gunvolt game in this franchise, and again, it really comes down to the camaraderie aspects. I felt like I understood these characters the most, and I understood like the villain's motivations the most, and it was kind of the more interesting. It feels like this is the Mega Man X4 for the Gunvolt series, because there's a lot of gray area in this game compared to the previous entries, where things are definitely like this group is clearly evil. And I kind of like that aspect of it, and I'm wondering what they're going to do with that with the next entry, or what's going to happen from there. The English voice casts all were fantastic, and I loved all the performances. Special shout out to Prado, the best character in the game. And I would love to see more of these characters in the future. And I haven't felt that way about any of the other Gunvolt games, or any of the spin-off Gunvolt games for that matter. And now I want to see these characters again. That's how well they were integrated into the story, and I just loved that in general. As far as the series goes from here, I have no idea, but that's what makes me kind of curious and very excited. So I hope that in the future we'll get another Gunvolt game. Maybe not for another like 3 years or so, but I can wait. I waited this long for a Gunvolt 3, and I can wait longer for a Gunvolt 4. Number 2. How do you measure a life? How can you stop the ever-encroaching reach of time? How? Many times do I need to beat this guy up to get his ability. Xenoblade 3! Oh, I have no script at this point. This game was phenomenal. I've been kind of going off script as it is, but I have no script for this game outside that intro bit right there, because I don't know how to properly convey my words into a text format that I'll then ignore and go ranting on. So that's what I've been doing. But man, this game. The Xenoblade series has been really fun for me, and it's definitely become my favorite RPG series of all time. And 2, I absolutely adored. It was a fun game to replay 1 back in 2020, but it still didn't hold a candle to 2. As far as how the characters interacted, as far as music, as far as areas went. But 3, man, I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to tell. It might be either better or on par with 2. The characters are all super fleshed out. They all have unique motivations, all unique ideals, and it's really cool to see how they all come together so quickly into the beginning of the game, and how they have to deal with that as part of kind of a growing pains as you're going through the rest of the story. All the areas to explore are vast and gorgeous. The music is fantastic as always, having some of the best battle themes in the entire franchise, along with just some of the most interesting concepts of how the story plays out. It's hard to discuss this game without getting into spoilers, and I don't want to spoil it because you need to play this game. You need to play all the Xenoblade games, really. But 3 especially, well, at least play 2 before playing 3, because you're going to be kind of lost if you go into 3 without playing one of the other 2 games, and 2 is the better of the first 2 games, so play 2. Man. I was playing this game for over a month, and, from the time it released last year, almost to the day that I'm recording this right now, until finally close to early mid-September when I finished it, and I was just, man, it takes you places. It makes you think about a lot of different concepts of just kind of how life itself is. And a lot of the gameplay is the most refined in the series. It's the easiest to pick up and play. It utilizes stuff from both 1 and 2 to make the most refined gameplay experience that feels the most at home and definitely feels the most polished of all of them. The different characters all having different ways of how they utilize their arts, depending on what nation they come from, or how different arts get added to them later on through gameplay. The whole Ouroboros system, there's a lot to talk about, and I can't tell you because it will be spoiling stuff, and there are spoilers right from the first cutscene in the game, essentially. So I can't say more other than just kind of giving the sizzle reel that I'm showing right now of some gameplay interspersed with cutscenes, because I don't know how else to describe this game. It's just a freaking masterpiece of an RPG. It's a long one for sure. All the Xenoblade games are long, but that's really if you want to be doing all the exploring, which I do, and there's a lot to explore. The way they do certain side quests now that are story related is the best the story has ever done, the best the series has ever done, rather. The way you get essentially new characters to your party and how that mechanic works is really dang cool. How you can essentially become different classes is really cool. Just the gameplay is so intertwined perfectly with the story that there's plenty of times where you're in a cutscene and you're like, man, okay, that's a cool cutscene, and then immediately it just transitions straight into gameplay. No loading screen or anything, it just goes there, and it's just like, man, how? And this is a Nintendo Switch, which is a weak system and everything, and it still looks freaking gorgeous everywhere you look. Oh my goodness. For those of you who have not played any of the previous games, some of the spectacle of this game will definitely be lost, which I feel is probably the only crutch the game has to go for it, is that this is meant to be an end point to the series as it is currently. And without having some of that prior knowledge of previous entries, it'll definitely be a bit more alienating. That said, how the game handles that and how it handles legacy characters, legacy elements, is really well done, that you can still get away with playing this game without knowing some of the other stuff, because the game still treats stuff in the way that it should be treated as how they put it into the story with some of these legacy elements and whatnot. So if you haven't played it, I would highly recommend you do, because man, you're going to get lost in this game, and it's a good kind of lost. The kind of lost where you're just like, man, I just want to go over there. I want to challenge that level 80 enemy. I'm level 17. I can challenge that level 80 enemy because I feel like it. Some of the gameplay of how it works actually encourages you to do stupid things like that, which is really cool. there's so many fun different like little hidden areas to find. I still need to go back and 100% the game because I haven't done that yet. Because there's actually like there's certain quests I haven't done and certain areas I haven't discovered yet. But some of the items they want you to do like really makes you focus on different aspects of combat, different aspects of cooking, different aspects of leveling up. It's just a lot of cool different things that it just makes it a complete experience. Monolith Soft, man. Oh my goodness. Nintendo was smart to have bought that studio, and I hope Monolith Soft gets the rights back to some of the other games they've made over the years at other companies, because I am more than curious to see how this gameplay style could affect remaking some of their older games, like the Xenosaga franchise, for example. But at the heart of it, what I just love about it, and this is something I really loved about too, is that the story, like, for all the big turns and twists it goes through, there's still a very simple premise at the core of the story. And that's what I loved about Xenoblade 2, and it's what I love about this game. 2 was essentially a love story, and 3 is a love story in its own right as well, but it's not just a love story between two characters, it's a love story of humanity itself, and kind of the idea of how we as a species, how we as people go through different types of grief, go through different types of loss, go through happiness, go through joy, how we experience life itself. The core theme of the game is just life, and I really like how the game ends on the conclusion of it. It may not come with the most interesting antagonist because of it, but for me, I think the idea of concepts is much more scarier than a person. A person is something you can easily overcome, because if you know how to get rid of that person, you can get rid of them. But you can't get rid of the concept. The concept will always be there, no matter what happens. So the ending, despite being so touching, does kind of have a bit of a hauntingness to it, that some of this stuff can come to pass again. And if anything, I'm glad that I am doing this review now, as opposed to when I was initially planning on doing this, which was at the end of April, because I also now have in context the story DLC that came with the game as well, released later on as additional paid content, because that really hammers home the idea of all of these emotions of how we need to process going forward as human beings. I won't get too much in the DLC story itself, because explaining what the DLC story is about is a spoiler of the main game in of itself. But it does bring back some more legacy characters I think a lot of fans are going to be happy about. It brings back some more legacy concepts and ideas that fans are going to really enjoy, and it ties in some interesting things that really puts in perspective to where Monolith wants to go with the story. This, again, as I said, is an end point, but does not mean it's the end of the story by a long shot. I think the only complaint I have is that, man, I wish I could have seen every legacy character. I know that would be unreasonable, but man, I would have loved to see Tora palling around with probably Ryan. Probably Tora insulting Ryan because Ryan's a dumb butt. I don't know, it'd be fun. Or seeing Tora with newcomer Riku, Riku is the second best no pawn in the entire series. I'm still a Tora stan, sorry, but Riku is common variety no pawn. Don't worry about him. He just does whatever. But it'd be cool to see them interact, or having characters like Poppy and the Machina interact. Like, I wish those things come to pass. That's why I'm fine saying this, because it's not technically a spoiler, because it never happens. But I'm kind of curious. As much as I know this is an end point, I hope it isn't the end of seeing these characters, because especially with the story DLC, I think they have fantastic protagonists that could work for a full-fledged game as opposed to a side story DLC. But man, what else to say about this game? Oh, there's some new mechanics brought in. They bring in a ship now. You actually have a vehicle for some parts of the game, which is really cool. Again, the level up mechanics and how you do different classes is really neat. What else to describe in this game? They brought back a bunch of legacy enemies as well. Seeing those all pop up is really cool. And again, it's hard to say without spoiling it, but there are some areas that if you played the previous two games, you're going to be like, whoa, because you're going to see a very different version of that area in this game now, and it's really cool to see how it reacts, how you get reactions out of not only yourself but the different characters as they explore. Because the one thing about the story, without going too deep into spoilers, is that these characters have never really experienced life. And so getting to see how they eventually go about seeing that, especially in their short lifetimes, is really cool and really kind of puts in perspective for you as the player just how important the idea of life is. And that's what really struck home with me, and why I really just, man, there's so many great moments, but I can't tell you without spoiling it, and I don't want to spoil it because I want you to play it for yourself. So if you've never played a Xenoblade game, play this one. I would recommend you play 2 at least first before playing this one, but you can play a Xenoblade 1 as well. All of them are fantastic, and all of them tie together into a really nice, complete story that has the perfect end node for now, but man, I want to see what they do next, because everything has just been so perfect for them. Maybe they're waiting for a new Nintendo console so they can really just flex, because Monolith Soft is easily one of the best developers out there in the entire gaming industry right now, and I applaud them for their hard efforts on all the other games they've supported over the years. Like this year, Tears of the Kingdom was helped by their developments, but their own original works with this series, with this franchise of Xenoblade, has been a phenomenal ride of the last 13 years or so playing, and I want to never leave it. It's been fantastic, and I want to see where it all goes, what it all could be, while also imbuing the lessons that these games really do bring in. Sometimes hammering home maybe a little too hard, but do bring in. They kind of make you really not just empathize with the characters and understand them better and get to learn about them too. Shouts to Senna, best girl. Seeing them and how they grow, but also how that reflects on your own personal thoughts and biases towards your own self. It really makes you reflect, and I really just enjoyed that especially. So, Monolith Soft, please keep doing the great stuff you're doing. I am still waiting for the deluxe OST to be released to me so I can read that maybe and see if there's extra stuff in there that may explain more of where the series is going, but oof. Pick up Xenoblade 3, pick up the entire DLC bundle because you get some extra stuff with that, there's some extra side quests that you get from that, and then the story DLC is really the perfect end cap to the entire game. And it brings everything full circle. What a fantastic franchise, and what a fantastic game that honestly deserved to be Game of the Year. I'm glad that it got nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. I'm glad it got nominated for Best Soundtrack, which it should have won because this soundtrack is one of the best in the entire franchise. And honestly, if it wasn't for a certain bias and a certain you know how I am, this would have been my best Game of the Year and would have been number 1. But as it is, number 2 isn't the bad spots, and it's still one of the best games of the year. If you have to pick only one game, and you don't like the next game I'm about to say, pick Xenoblade 3 to play. Fantastic adventure from start to finish. Number 1. I have no script for this. When I was initially writing this all out, I had wrote a big script that I was like, I should stick to that, and I've done a bad job of doing that. But when it came to what I knew was going to be my best game of the year, my favorite game of the year, my number 1 picked, my personal game of the year, I was just like, man, I have no idea what to even write for this. I could think of a fun little quippy fun thing to say for the beginning of Xenoblade 3, but this game, I don't know. And I mean, at this point, come on. You all know what it is. Cue the music. Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I like Kirby. No, wait, that's wrong. I don't like Kirby. I love Kirby. This franchise has been so dear to my heart since I was a child, and finally getting to see Kirby go into a 3D space for a full mainline game was a phenomenon and a true treat to behold. The transition for most characters from going from 2D to 3D sometimes isn't the smoothest. And while people will have fond nostalgia for some of the stuff that happened back in the days of the N64 and PlayStation 1 era, I don't think a lot of those are very smooth, and I think going back to them, there's a bit of jank to them. And what's kind of interesting about that is that because Kirby took so long, it could learn from all of those at how best to adapt to that while also keeping the same Kirby charm and the same Kirby staples. In doing so, it's probably one of the best first time outs, or how do you say, first outings, there we go. First outings of a 3D platformer for a character that was initially in 2D. I adore this game. I mean, I did a whole Let's Play on it, and you've probably seen that already, maybe, but man, what to say about this game that hasn't been said already? From the outset, just how the game approaches the introduction, completely different, completely new, threw me through a loop, and I was smiling the whole time. The ability to go back and replay stages for different missions definitely makes it really fun to go back and kind of do different things, getting all the Waddle Dees. Making the Waddle Dees collectibles in and of itself was such a good idea because they're so adorable as it is, and just making it when you rescue Kirby's friends essentially in this strange new place. Having different varied areas, stuff we've seen before of course, like, you know, a grass area, a beach area, a snow area, but how they all adapted so well into the 3D environment and how they made all the stages feel so unique from each other. The theme park world, for instance, has a lot of different things going on because, like, the very first stage you'll go on a roller coaster, but the next stage you're doing race car tracks, and the next stage you're in a freaking haunted house, and then you're in a parade. Like, it's so cool how they did that, while also bringing unique music to everything, and also kind of playing it safe with the abilities. I like the idea that what they wanted to do with this game is because they really wanted to focus on the exploration of the 3D, they toned the abilities down. And I can see how that can be a detriment to some people, but it's hard for me to think about how you would make the abilities super crazy like they were in Star Allies and do it immediately for this game with first outing. This to me is the adventure, and we're still waiting for the superstar of Kirby 3D. But hey, adventure was really good when it first came out, and this game is really good when it first came out too, in my opinion. I like the idea that you can actually craft and make new upgrades to the abilities that have different features and different types of power or speed, and they all come with different unique hats that are all really cute, and it makes you want to be like, well, I kind of want to use this one because the Mr. Frosty hat's cuter than the tier 3 hats, or, you know, me and the pirate hat the entire game because I just really like that ability. The new abilities they added in worked really well too because they were built for the 3D space. I don't think there's an ability these abilities would work too well in the 2D Kirby setting because they already either have similar analogs to them, like we have the sniper ability in the 2D space for the ranger ability, or like drill. Is that even needed for a 2D space? But I like that they utilize that to kind of really up the ante on the 3D space, and it kind of makes me interested to see what they're going to do for a future game. I know a lot of people are be like, well, what if they could have just done that all out at once? I think that's kind of the thought process, I think, with a lot of HAL games is that they do go for those big ideas, but they scale back so they can make sure that what they give you is the most pristine meal you've ever had. So rather than having all the bells and whistles everywhere, and then, you know, some of them maybe are a little half-baked, instead, we trim that to where we get the perfect gourmet meal of a game. And they have been constantly doing that throughout the entire Shinya Kumazaki era of him directing these games. And he wasn't even the main director on this game either, which I think is really interesting because that really brings to the table, like, what they can do in the future with this. I love how cute everything was. I loved Elflin as a new character. You really got to bond with Elflin so that when some things later in the game happen, that you actually feel like you feel the emotions Kirby feels. All of the boss fights are also super fun of how they did those, and I like the different concepts of how they brought some boss fights that used to be in 2D into 3D and how those all work out. Obviously, it's still a Kirby game, so it's not going to be the most difficult thing in the world, but I like that it brings back some of that Kirby's Dream Land 2, Kirby 64 energy with the different missions you need to do to find the different Waddle Dees scattered throughout the stage, or how you need to do certain things in order to beat the stage with it. So I like that they brought that back. I would agree, yes, with the complaints of, yes, maybe you should just unlock knowing how to do all of them after you beat the stage, but other than that, I can't really find any faults with this game. The dodge mechanic that they put in that has been in there since Star Allies now in 3D, they made that into a fun, essentially kind of like Bayonetta Witch Time mechanic, which is really crazy to think about. How other games have really influenced how this game came out. And I felt like, for certain, that with all these other characters going to 3D and all these different 3D games going around, that HAL really, really wanted to take their time, really wanted to polish everything to the best of their ability to give everyone the best kind of game they could. And I felt like they just nailed that on every single aspect of this game. Can I say it's my favorite Kirby game of all time? Probably, but I usually kind of do that with every new Kirby release. But it does bring up a new thing, is now we have 3D Kirby games and 2D mainline Kirby games. So, with that in mind, I have two best Kirby games of all time now. Kirby Star Allies and Kirby in the Forgotten Land. Oh, and I mentioned the music, but again, shoutouts to the music team. All of them. We have the mainstays of Jun Ishikawa and Hidekazu Ando back, but we also have newcomer Yuta Sawada, who worked on Star Allies, and also Yuki Shimuka, who's a newcomer completely, and some of the tracks that they compose for these newcomers are so freaking good that I feel comfortable that if Kumazaki, Ishikawa, and Ando were to leave, this entire team is still in fantastic hands with the director of this game and with the new sound team and everything. I am just so excited to see where the Kirby series goes from here. But we probably won't see that for a while now while they work on the next mainline Kirby game, as we all still cool off from how just epic this game was. Oh, I even mentioned the whole mouthful mode stuff where you get to become a traffic cone or a car or anything, and just the interesting puzzles and everything, just it all works out just so flawlessly. I honestly just want to boot this game up right now and play it, so I think that's what I'm going to do. So, that is my full list with some honorable mentions of the games I played in 2022. Sorry for this video for being a bit long, but hopefully I'll trim it down in the edits, and it won't be as long as it was the recording. And hopefully I also can figure out how to do music in the background for this. I want to do music in the background, but now I'm starting to see that might not be the case of how long I've ranted and raved about some of these titles. Full list for those who were not paying attention. Number 7, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge. Number 6, Froggun. Number 5, River City Girls 2. Number 4, Bayonetta 3. Number 3, Azure Strike Gunvolt 3. Number 2, Xenoblade 3, the 3 trilogy right there, I guess. And number 1, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. 2022 was an incredible year for games, and I'm very excited to see what other games 2023 still has to offer to me as I get into the last quarter of it now, as this video is coming out in August. Oops. Please pick these games up and give them a try if you haven't already. I highly recommend all of them. Otherwise, please have a wonderfully great day, and I will see you on the next project for whoever that may be. Until then, KV out.